Hello, my name is Dr. Nathaniel Blackwood, and I have a confession to make. I am a respected neurosurgeon renowned for my groundbreaking work in the field of mind-machine interfaces. But beneath the veneer of success and acclaim lies a dark obsession that has consumed me for years. It all began when I stumbled upon an ancient tome in a hidden corner of the university library. The book spoke of a forbidden technique that could grant the user unimaginable power over the human mind. Intrigued, I delved deeper into the arcane knowledge, spending countless nights poring over the cryptic pages. As I unraveled the secrets of the tome, I became convinced that I could use this knowledge to push the boundaries of neuroscience. I started experimenting on myself, implanting electrodes into my own brain, testing the limits of what was possible. At first, the results were astounding. I could access previously untapped regions of my mind, unlocking hidden potential and expanding my cognitive abilities. But as I delved deeper, I began to notice strange side effects. I started to hear voices, whispers in the darkness that seemed to come from within my own head. At first I dismissed them as hallucinations, but as they grew louder and more insistent, I could no longer ignore them. The voices spoke of an ancient entity, a being of immense power that had been trapped within the human psyche for millennia. They urged me to continue my experiments, promising me untold knowledge and power if I could find a way to release it. Driven by a mad desire to uncover the truth, I began to seek out test subjects for my experiments. I preyed upon the vulnerable and the desperate, luring them in with promises of relief from their suffering. In a secret laboratory hidden beneath the hospital, I subjected my victims to a series of brutal procedures, implanting electrodes into their brains and exposing them to the same arcane knowledge that had consumed me. Some of them survived, their minds warped and twisted by the power that now coursed through their veins. They became my acolytes, loyal servants who would do anything to further my research. Others were not so fortunate. Their minds shattered under the strain, leaving them as little more than empty shells, their bodies still alive but their souls forever lost. As my experiments continued, I began to feel a change within myself. The voices in my head grew louder, more demanding, and I could feel a dark presence lurking at the edges of my consciousness. I knew that I was losing control, that the entity I had sought to unleash was now consuming me from within. But I was too far gone to turn back now. The final straw came when I performed the ultimate experiment on myself. Using a complex array of electrodes and arcane symbols, I opened a gateway within my own mind, allowing the entity to fully manifest. In that moment, I saw the truth of what I had become. I was no longer human, but a vessel for an ancient and malevolent force that had been waiting for countless ages to be unleashed upon the world. With my remaining humanity rapidly fading, I made a final, desperate attempt to contain the entity within myself. I sealed myself inside my laboratory, using every ward and sigil I could muster to keep the darkness at bay. But I know that it is only a matter of time before the entity breaks free. Even now, I can feel it clawing at the edges of my mind, whispering promises of power and destruction. And so I sit here, trapped within the confines of my own twisted creation, waiting for the inevitable moment when the darkness will consume me entirely. To anyone who may find this confession, I offer a warning. The path I have walked is one of madness and damnation, and the knowledge I have unleashed must never be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. Destroy my research, burn my laboratory to the ground, and let my name be forgotten. For the sake of all humanity, the secrets I have uncovered must die with me. But even as I write these words, I can feel the entity stirring within me, its power growing stronger with each passing moment. It knows that its time is coming, and it will stop at nothing to be free. And when that day comes, may God have mercy on us all. As I sit here in my self-imposed prison, I can feel the entity's influence spreading like a cancer through my mind. It whispers to me constantly, promising power beyond my wildest dreams if only I would surrender to its will. I try to resist, to cling to the last shreds of my humanity, but I can feel my resolve weakening with each passing day. The wards and sigils that once held the darkness at bay are beginning to crack and crumble, and I know that it is only a matter of time before they fail entirely. In a desperate attempt to find a way to stop the entity, I have been poring over my research notes, searching for any clue that might lead to a solution. But the more I read, the more I realized the true extent of my folly. The ancient tome that started me on this path was not just a collection of arcane knowledge, but a trap, designed to lure the unwary into unleashing an unspeakable evil upon the world. The entity that now resides within me is not some mere demon or spirit, but a primordial force of chaos and destruction, a being that predates the very concept of humanity. It was imprisoned eons ago by a group of powerful mystics who sacrificed their very souls to bind it within the pages of the tome. But now, through my own hubris and arrogance, I have unleashed it once more. As I delve deeper into the true nature of the entity, I begin to realize the full extent of its power. It is not just a threat to individual minds, but to the very fabric of reality itself. If it is allowed to fully manifest, it will tear apart the boundaries between dimensions, unleashing a horde of nightmarish creatures upon our world. Cities will be reduced to rubble, and the streets will run red with the blood of the innocent. An eye doctor, Nathaniel Blackwood, will be the one responsible for it all. In a moment of clarity, I realize that there is only one way to stop the entity. I must destroy myself and take the knowledge of how to summon it with me into oblivion. With trembling hands, I gather together the last of my research notes and the ancient tome that started it all. I douse them in gasoline and set them alight, watching as the flames consume the only record of my madness. Then, I turn to the array of electrodes and arcane symbols that cover the walls of my laboratory. With a few swift keystrokes, I initiate the self-destruct sequence, knowing that the resulting explosion will reduce everything within a 100-meter radius to ash. As the countdown begins, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. I have done what I can to contain the entity, to prevent it from unleashing its full horror upon the world. But even as I close my eyes and await the end, I can feel the entity raging within me, screaming in fury as it realizes that its chance for freedom has been snatched away. In those final moments, I see a vision of the future that might have been. A world consumed by darkness, where the very laws of nature have been twisted and perverted to serve the entity's will. And I know that, even in death, I will be forever haunted by the knowledge of what I have done. As the timer reaches zero and the world around me erupts in a blinding flash of light and heat, I whisper a final prayer, begging for forgiveness from a God I am no longer sure exists. And then there is only silence. But even as my story comes to an end, I know that the entity is not truly gone. It is too powerful, too ancient, to ever be fully destroyed. It will find another way, another vessel, to unleash its horror upon the world. And when that day comes, I can only hope that someone will be there to stop it, to succeed where I have failed. For the sake of all humanity, the cycle must be broken. The ancient evil must be vanquished, once and for all. But as I take my final breath, I know that the true horror of my story is not in my own fate, but in the knowledge that somewhere out there the entity is waiting, biding its time, ready to strike again when the moment is right. And may heaven help us all when it does. As the explosion consumed the laboratory, reducing it to nothing more than a smoldering crater, the city above remained oblivious to the narrowly averted apocalypse. The authorities would investigate, of course, but they would find nothing but the charred remains of a madman's failed experiments. But even as the ashes settled and the smoke cleared, the entity's influence continued to spread, like tendrils of corruption seeking out new minds to infect. In the weeks and months that followed, strange reports began to surface across the country. People vanishing without a trace, only to reappear days later, their minds shattered and their bodies twisted into nightmarish forms. Whispers of a new cult began to circulate, a group of fanatics who claimed to worship an ancient god of chaos and destruction. They called themselves the Disciples of the Void, and their numbers grew with each passing day. At first, the authorities dismissed them as just another fringe group, a bunch of deluded souls seeking meaning in a world that had none. But as the disappearances and the sightings of strange, inhuman creatures continued to mount, they could no longer ignore the truth. The entity that had once been contained within Dr. Blackwood's mind had found a new way to manifest, spreading its influence through the very people it sought to destroy. And as the world teetered on the brink of madness, a small group of individuals began to emerge, each driven by a shared purpose to stop the entity and its minions before it was too late. Among them was Sarah, a young woman with a gift for seeing beyond the veil of reality. She had been plagued by visions of the entity since childhood, and had spent her life searching for a way to stop it. Joining her was Father Malachi, a priest who had stumbled upon an ancient order dedicated to fighting the forces of darkness. He brought with him a wealth of knowledge and a fierce determination to protect the innocent. And then there was Jeremiah, a former soldier who had seen firsthand the horrors that lurked in the shadows. He had lost everything to the entity's machinations and now sought only revenge. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, each bringing their own strengths and weaknesses to the fight. They tracked down the Disciples of the Void, battling their way through hordes of twisted monsters and fanatical cultists. But even as they fought, they knew that they were only delaying the inevitable. The entity was too powerful, too deeply entrenched, to ever be truly defeated. In a final, desperate gambit, they staged an assault on the cult's stronghold, a decrepit mansion that pulsed with an unholy energy. There, in the heart of the darkness, they confronted the entity itself, now fully manifest in the form of a towering, tentacled horror. The battle was fierce and brutal, with Sarah, Father Malachi, and Jeremiah throwing everything they had at the monster. But even as they fought, they could feel their strength waning, their minds and bodies pushed to the very limits of endurance. And then, just when all seemed lost, Sarah had a moment of clarity. She realized that the only way to defeat the entity was to seal it away, just as the ancient mystics had done so long ago. Using every ounce of her power, she opened a portal to a realm beyond space and time, a place where the entity could be contained for all eternity. With a final Herculean effort, she dragged the screaming, writhing horror through the portal, sealing it behind her with a blast of blinding light. In the aftermath of the battle, Father Malachi and Jeremiah emerged from the ruins of the mansion, battered and bruised but alive. They searched for Sarah but found no trace of her, only a faint, lingering sense of her presence. They knew that she had sacrificed herself to save them all, to give humanity a fighting chance against the darkness that threatened to consume it. And as they stood there, amidst the rubble and the wreckage, they made a solemn vow to carry on her legacy, to continue the fight against the forces of chaos and destruction. For they knew that the entity was not truly gone, only imprisoned. And they knew that someday it would find a way to break free once more. But when that day came, they would be ready. They would stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. And they would fight for Sarah, for humanity, and for the future that she had given them all.